This building is a reflection of where the city is at a given time. My greatest hope is that the energy that has been shifted to bring back life into the building stays and grows and has reinvigorated the life into the building, and that momentum that has been built can continue. My name's Adam Gordon, and I'm the founder and creator of The Temple, contemporary artist haven, as coined by the artists in the building. A lot of what I do here is hopefully create conditions for the creative spirit to live and grow in other people, and try to be supportive of the people who choose to bring their energy and create in the space. This building was built in 1882 by Frank and Willoughby Edbrooke, who built the Brown Palace, the Tabor Opera House, the Oxford Hotel as well. They built this for a lot of the growing affluent community of people who were thriving in Denver. And so the first congregation, the Temple Emmanuel, at first it was a really nice place to live, but as the steel smelting and iron industries grew and grew, the industry shifted and they left, and then it became a little bit more religious. In BMH was the next synagogue. By the end, there was a third synagogue called Temple Beth Joseph, like an Orthodox congregation, which is the most observant. And then after the Orthodox temple had moved on, it really fell into disrepair. The Mile High United Way was alleged to have been founded in this building with Francis Weisbord Jacobs. That energy was a collaborative effort. We have some old newspaper publishings that state such, that they were known for their organ and that they had a lot of interfaith and secular community activities in here, and that helped pay the purchase price of the building. Then it was acquired by a printing facility next door, Golden Belt Press, who owned the property for a significant portion of the 1950s through 70s. And when they needed to expand next door, they expanded into this building and put on a couple of additions. And then they sold it to Eugene Tepper. He stored his plumbing supplies in the building, and he did have broad visions for the neighborhood and for what it could become. But at the time, he had to wait. It wasn't until 5 years ago that he came to the building happily and could see some of his vision realized. I got the building in 2014. It was important to have a purpose and a function of the building that reflected what was conducive to the building itself. And there were two directions that I could have taken. One is pour a ton of money into the space and not have the community. The next best thing I could do was to make it nice enough so that it would live on into the next iteration, that the building could be saved, which was a primary goal, and then to keep it as much as I could to the community, so long as the community was able to support it. The Moorish revival architecture influenced a lot of synagogues all throughout Europe and the United States after the 1400s, when the Jews were expelled along with the Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula, which was in historical Jewish times one of the most revered times and most spiritually enlightened times in Jewish history. This architectural style traveled with them, so that was an important part. And then the Romanesque style, it's a little hard to tell with the building because it had a fire early on, so the building used to have a wood tower instead of the masonry tower that it has today, and it used to have two of them. There were two smaller spired towers, and I think the details and the actual architecture itself was more ornate in its original form, but throughout the years, for preservation purposes, it was scaled back to a little bit more of a minimalist form. The tower itself is just access to the eaves of the roof, and we needed to have that stabilized for the installation of the solar panels on the building. So we had rickety stairs and rickety ladders that needed to be a little bit more stable. Scrubbing pigeon feces and looking at the scarred, charred remains of the tower itself from one of the early fires, and shoring up the stairwell and making sure that the eaves to the building itself were secure. So it wasn't necessarily a renovation, it was more creating the access, and in doing so, giving a nice little gallery space for the artists who have been in the space to be able to have work for folks who come through the building and to see who's been a part of the building at various points in time. There was a fire in the boiler room in, I think, 1894, 1896, and then again in 1904. However, it's built like a fortress. We have 16 to 18 inch thick walls, depending upon where you are in the building. And when you talk about buildings' lifespan, this is likely to outlive myself and a number of other people who are living today. It couldn't live on for an extended period of time with the masonry construction that it has. It was a rave and a punk venue called the Gog and the Fun House. This is the site where Black Flag played, Nirvana played pre-Bleach tour when it was just a DIY venue before it was the Bluebird. It had just shows all the time. The rooms on the second floor were turned into the Trippin' Room and the Blue Room and the Red Room and the Green Room, and it had all these different themed rooms depending upon the parties, and it had a lot of raw underground energy for a long time. Wanting to at least keep some of that ethos as the neighborhood changed, and wanting the building to be its modern iteration that could sustain itself and grow, we really needed to just make sure that it worked. We've had music festivals, we've hosted 2 parts. The entire time we have had Sentimental Studios, which provide creative alternatives to suicide for LGBTQ youth. The Zine Library in here, Platform, who's a wonderful nonprofit. Show Lab space downstairs is in and itself really cool as a functional modern photo studio. We never really die as a photo studio in the building with Julian Donaldson. They elevate the aesthetic of the building just by being here and bringing their energy and bringing their styles. We built a bootstrap bakery that fostered 5 Points Pizza, Long Eye Pie Shop, Heirloom Catering, Rebel Bread, the Flower Shop, who's the current iteration that will be taking over the entirety of the space and growing their business within it. A lot of the money that has gone into the improvements to the space have come from the nonprofit and community sectors and collaborative grants, matched grants from myself, and just alongside a broader vision for the community. We've had a number of artists go on to do great things, some who are still here and many who have moved on, whether it be Thomas Detour Evans, who's still here, or Suchitra Matai, who's in Los Angeles, or Reagan Rosberg, who's done amazing things in the environmental sector, or Jonathan Size, Mario Zutz, Juan Fuentes photography collection, or John Lake's beautiful artwork. The work and the accomplishments of many of the people are throughout the city, whether you be in a hotel or in museums. Again, the building is as good as the people who are in it and the energy that's within the building.
This space and area has just become like a good launching pad for a lot of my career and a lot of the work that I do. So my name is Thomas Evans. I go by Detour, full-time artist based in Denver, Colorado. I do a ton of murals, interactive art, just anything multidisciplinary. So like right now I'm learning how to sew, which is really cool. For 10 years, I've just been like going back and forth from the temple doing artwork, and hopefully for another 10. I like this space a lot because there's a lot of people around me that do a ton of different things. There's artists that think outside the box. They don't think like me, so it's like I'm able to go down the hall and talk to them all the time. I'm learning fashion and sewing only because we had someone who does fashion and sewing in the building. So for me, it's one of the things where it's kind of like it fuels my creativity. So you need space to grow as an artist. So for me, this is like a really great spot. We're also 2 blocks away from Welton Street, which used to be the Harlem of the West. And that's where a lot of the jazz artists like Coltrane and Louis Armstrong used to go and play jazz and stuff. So like this area right here has a lot of history. So being a part of that history for me is really cool. And to do it through the arts, I think is something that I really want to really emphasize and be a part of. There needed to be a space like this in this neighborhood because you need affordable rents for artists to actually work and have to think about making art that pays the rent versus art that's just exploratory and what they want to do. And that's why I think it's been so successful. So hopefully this building can stay in some form or fashion like a creative hub for people and a beacon for this area of 5 Points, and just start to foster more of that creative energy that has been growing as the city grows.
Denver as a city is pretty well positioned for the future relative to other places, and that city is dynamic, and we have Section 8 housing next to low-income housing next to $1 million houses, but it's already well past the idea of being an up-and-coming area. And I think the Curtis Park neighbors, because of the historic nature of a lot of the architecture in the neighborhood and a desire to keep these buildings standing and to steadily improve them or dramatically improve them, that those things all bode well for this neighborhood going forward. The goal was to just keep the building standing and to get it to a point to whereby the next person would see the value in keeping it standing. And the irony of that is the land value would have probably been more than the actual building itself. But the conditions have changed. There's a greater incentive to keep the building. It may not be the highest architectural aesthetic value that the building can have in the future, but the idea that we've brought it this far is really helpful for setting the stage for whatever the next evolutions are. My greatest hope is that the energy that has been shifted to bring back life into the building in and itself stays and grows and has reinvigorated the life into the building, and that momentum that has been built can continue. At whatever point in the future things shift, that there are more resources so that some of the architectural beauty of the building's exterior and interior can match the energy that the building has in its inherent spiritual value. It is a reflection of where the city is at a given moment or where our society is in a given moment. These days it's in the form of visual artists, but at one point in the same space that we're standing, choirs sang, punk musicians played, and DJs played, and people did all sorts of different things in here depending upon where the city was, where the mood was, and where the vibe was. I think that the echoes of the past and the vibration of the present will probably permeate into the future, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.